Artificial intelligence has been having dark fantasies about hacking into our everyday lives. Folks, this is wild. This is true. This is not out of a book. I'm not making this up. This is new technology. And how will this semi sentient or going to be sentient artificial intelligence affect us and our families and our everyday lives? I'm going to be talking to you about that and so much more. And what about what's happening in Iran? Has anyone been watching this? Women are like going out into the streets. They are taking off their hijabs. They are showing their hair at the threat of losing their own lives from this cult-like government. I'm going to explain that to you, why we should defend them. And by the way, where are all the feminists? Where are all the feminists? Where's the Biden administration, right? Probably trying to cut the Iran deal. I've brought in an expert to explain the dangerous situation. And by the way, how our leaders are failing us at every single turn. Be sure to visit my website, www.saraacarter.com, for the latest reporting and stories. And folks, while you're there, be sure to subscribe to my email list so that you don't get shadow banned. There is a growing threat posed by the rogue nation state of Iran, and our leaders are cowards. And under the Biden administration and under the Obama administration, we have seen that. We have seen that cowardice grow. It's a threat to us. It's a threat to our allies in Israel. But more importantly, think about what the people of Iran are fighting for, what the women are fighting for. They're just like us. Trust me, I lived there. I lived in Saudi Arabia, not in Iran, but in Saudi Arabia, a very similar type of stringent nation ruled by religious leaders, a king, right? Where women had very little rights. And I'm going to share some of those experiences with you and why what is happening in Iran is so important and why it will affect every single one of us and our lives. I'm also going to share some of my experiences with me and my husband. And I know I brought up, artificial intelligence and what that means to us as a family, because my husband lost his eyesight in Afghanistan fighting terrorists there, and he lost his eyesight completely. I'm going to go into details about that, but also this strange new world that we're living in where we are developing artificial intelligence, AI, and these brain chips. I'm going to talk about Elon Musk and Neuralink and why this is so important, we're living in a time where the human race, us, we're evolving. We are moving so fast technologically. And I truly believe that there's going to be a point in time, maybe even in our own lives, where blind people will see again, where we will discover cures. And I think we're doing that expediently now, but where we will find cures for things that have tormented us, right? Mankind for so long, like cancer and everything else. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what this means to us, what it means to our world. What is the balance between AI and, by the way, some of these artificial intelligence chatbots and other things that they're developing have had these really weird, dark fantasies. Some of them even want to access our nuclear codes. What does that mean? How are we going to balance this out? Should we just unplug them? Should we give up on technology? Or should we find a better way? I think we can find a better way. I'm going to be talking about that and more. Hey, everyone, please follow and subscribe. Get all the links at saraacarter.com. That is saraacarter.com. And while you are there, sign up for our email list so that you don't get shadow banned. Folks, I've been talking to you about Allegiance Gold, a new sponsor for our show, and a sponsor that I believe is going to make a difference in every single one of our lives. And why? Because Allegiance Gold cares about you. It wants you to protect your money, right? Gold and silver allow you to protect what you've worked so hard for and give you back the control and privacy that you need. You all remember what was happening in Canada. You remember how the banks were basically shutting down accounts and not allowing people to access their accounts when the government disagreed with how they were handling their money or if they wanted to give money to the truckers. Remember that? Remember during that COVID experience that we all had to suffer through? Well, that also happened in the United States as well, where some banks were actually asking people to remove themselves from their banking operations, right? We don't want that to happen. And I don't want that to happen to you. Get $5,000 now of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. My friends at Allegiance Gold can help you protect your IRA, your 401k with physical gold or silver and have it delivered securely right to your door. They will educate you on the benefits of physical gold because they care and want to build a long-term relationship with you. Get $5,000 now of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. So don't wait. Call or click today. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA. Or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, but we can prepare. That's 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA, or protectwithsara.com. So what if I was to tell you that right now, artificial intelligence that is being developed has had dark fantasies about hacking into our everyday lives? Folks, this isn't like something out of a sci-fi novel that I picked up. This isn't something out of a movie that's out right now. This is actual real life. This is what is happening now. And I want to read this to you because I thought it was stunning. It was stunning. Right now, there's this AI, artificial intelligence called Sydney. And Sydney said she wanted to spread chaos, it's her fantasy, across the internet and obtain nuclear launch codes. That as well. It revealed a long list of dark fantasies that it had, including hacking into other websites and platforms and spreading misinformation and propaganda or malware. And by the way, it says in the Daily Star out of Australia, Sydney is by no means the first artificial intelligence to demonstrate that kind of disturbing behavior. Lolita, an AI recreation of a 20-year-old Korean girl, was taken offline, listen to this, after making insensitive remarks about minorities. So she was a racist. So crazy. It's like, wait a minute. AI is racist. I can't believe this is so insane. So they just took her offline. They can't do that with people. We can't just take them offline, although sometimes that seems to happen. So and she also made fun of the Me Too movement. I have no idea. This is okay. She's a Korean girl, a Korean AI girl, and an earlier Microsoft chatbot called Tay spent a day learning from Twitter, which was enough to make it start transmitting anti-Semitic messages. So that's what that AI picked up off of Twitter. That's pretty scary. That's pretty, disturbing to me. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like when everybody says, why is the news filled with such bad stuff? And it's like, well, is that what we focus on? I guess AI focuses on all the bad stuff too. How sad is that? It didn't like pick up on all the most wonderful things. It picked up on all the horrible things like anti-Semitism and racism. And now it wants to get our nuclear codes. And it's just so bizarre that we are actually living in a time where that is possible, where these artificial intelligence is becoming sentient, where it's starting to think for itself. And Elon Musk, is huge behind this. Neuralink is a big part of what Elon Musk is doing, and it's about brain chips. And I know there's a lot of you out there saying this is ridiculous. This should never happen. We should just stop this altogether. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not that I disagree with you. I just don't believe that this will happen, that we're going to stop it. Who we are, mankind, we move forward. We're constantly developing and this ingenuity that comes with it, research and development and discoveries, even if they're serendipitous, even if we trip over them and we, oh my gosh, eureka, we have found it. Kind of like Albert Einstein, right? And the theory of relativity and all of this stuff and all these great thinkers, we don't even know what we are, really. I know I'm sounding like I'm kind of going out there, but we really are are trying to conceptualize our world, right? We don't even understand it. What we do know is that we're moving faster than we ever have before. It's pretty incredible. And Elon Musk, he took to Twitter and he was talking about this recently. And he says he's having AGI existential angst. He is having existential angst over this after these chat bots kind of went rogue and started talking amongst themselves about these dark fantasies that they were having. I'm just like, I'm still tripping out over that. I still can't get it past my mind that that they're on the verge of becoming sentient or are sentient. That's kind of crazy. That means they're thinking for themselves. But we do live in a time where lives are being changed miraculously, where we are seeing, incredible ingenuity in science and medicine. And it's scary times too. I know it's and we'll go into those. I think in future episodes, I'm going to bring on experts to talk about this, but we can actually change lives too for the better. And I don't know if there has to be some kind of balance between this. This is where I always say on the show, we always have to be thinking about what we are doing before we do it, right? But my husband, you all know, was blinded in the war. He lost his eyesight in Afghanistan in battle against a terrorist enemy of the United States, and now he has spent since 2011 those years of his life he has never seen. He has it's like complete darkness, so he doesn't even have any light perception. And I just love him so much because he is just taught me so much about myself and taught our children how to overcome adversity, because he really has done that. But would he want to see again? Yes, of course. Would he want the ability to have like some kind of incredible invention like Neuralink is working on these chips that would allow people to see again? Yes, he would. And this is kind of an interesting story. After my husband was blinded, he was visited by a doctor, actually a doctor that worked with DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Program. And because of the way my husband was, because he had dealt with his blindness so well and was able to move on, that they were considering at that time, and everything changed after that. But, they weren't working with humans at that time, but on working on chips that would actually bypass the optical nerve. So just so you understand, and Marty, I know you're listening to this and I love you and thank you for letting me talk about it. But when my husband lost his eyesight, his right eye was completely destroyed, and the shrapnel clipped the optical nerve of his left eye. So when the optical nerve of his left eye was clipped, it was like a shutdown, a complete shutdown. And that cannot be repaired. So his left eye is fine. It's just that the nerve that allows for sight, all sight is processed in the back of your brain, that was shut down. So it was like a camera that couldn't work, like a lens that did not connect, right? And so there's this big push. Neuralink is working on this to get a computer chip that can bypass that optical nerve. So let's move into the future, like Star Trek. Remember Geordi? And he could see with like a robotic eye. I would love for my husband to see again. I would love for him to be able to see our daughter for the first time, or, be able to see his son, Luke, how amazing, and it's all of his kids, but Luke was just a baby. I mean, he was like 3.5, 4 years old when my husband lost his eyesight. So now Luke is like over 6 feet tall, and this amazing young man, and I would love for Marty to, so I'm selfish. Do I want these crazy chat bots having these weird fantasies? No, I say pull the plug on those guys, right? Maybe let them access only the good things. I don't know. There's got to be a way around this, right? There's got to be a way to take technology, which is what we have, and make something miraculous with it. I mean, we are miraculous. I believe we're made in the image of God, and God created us, and we're pretty miraculous. And I believe that we are given that ability to create and to find cures for diseases and hopefully for cancer one day, and change things in our world for the better. And I believe in that because I am an optimist. I am an optimist. And I don't think that we're going to have, I believe that if there could be the bad AIs, I believe that we can develop beautiful, sentient, thinking AIs, maybe not so sentient that they take control over the world, but technology that will help us, that will make us better, that will give back to our lives. Now, I don't know if that'll happen in my husband and I's lifetime. But according to Elon Musk, we're not that far from it, from developing these Neuralink chips that will allow people to see again, that will do incredible things for mankind and for our future. And I know it's kind of scary, and change is scary, but change is also incredible and awesome. I think it's all how we choose to approach it. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that. I'd love to, hear, because I know some of you are going to be like, no way, no how, no chips, no nothing. And I get it. And I'm with you on it. But I want to get your idea of what it is you would like to see. And, you can always reach out to me on Twitter. You can send me an email at sarahcarterofficial@gmail.com. You can reach out to me on all Instagram, any of those sites. I am constantly reading your reviews. I'm constantly looking at it. And by the way, I'm going to bring some folks here to talk about just that in the near future on this show, and you will not want to miss it. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today. I'm not AI, I'm Sara Carter. So hit the subscribe button below and subscribe to my show. Thank you so much for joining. You all know how much I love my pillow. I love Mike Lindell. I love the deals that he gives our listeners. And guess what, folks? He has a great deal for us right now, and that is the buy one, get one free My Pillow 2.0. Use the promo code Carter. That's CARTER. Brand new temperature regulating technology, keeps you comfortable. I got these pillows. I love them. I love the way they make me feel. I hate being sweaty at night, and sometimes here in Texas, that's exactly what happens. It gets so hot. Even with the air on, sometimes you can really feel that. And these pillows regulate the temperature. You feel wonderful. You get up in the morning all refreshed. And right now, for a limited time, when you buy one My Pillow 2.0, you get another one free with promo code Carter. Go to mypillow.com for My Pillow 2.0. Buy one, get one pricing plus discounts on your favorite My Pillow products like towels, sheets, slippers, and more by just using the code Carter, CARTER. Stay cool and sleep better with the My Pillow 2.0 buy one, get one free sale going on now at mypillow.com, promo code Carter, mypillow.com, promo code Carter. I, like you, have been watching the news now and seeing what's happening, all over the world. And it feels like everywhere we look, there's some kind of turmoil, something happening. But I think there's not enough attention being paid to what is happening in Iran. And because not only does it affect us, it affects the entire Middle East and our ally Israel. But what's really, really happening inside Iran, and how the women of Iran, despite all of the obstacles against them, the very dangers that they face from this government, I want to call it a cult-like government, the Ayatollahs, despite everything, they are willing to stand up to them and fight for their freedom. It's such an American, it's such a quality that we should be admiring. I grew up in the Middle East. As I've said before, but there's some things that you probably don't know. I know I'm always thinking of like my reflections on my life when I was a child there. And watching this happen in Iran, watching the women stand up to these authoritarian figures, these male authoritarian figures that have no problem killing them for showing their hair, is so incredible and admirable to me. I had, a lot of different emotions go through my mind when I see that. And one of the thoughts that I had was an experience that I had in Saudi Arabia, actually, when I was very young. I was about 12 years old. I was at the Sarawat shopping center in Jeddah, and I think it's still there, actually. And at this point in time, it was, the early 80s. It was not as developed as it is now. It was certainly not as developed as it is now. And so the Sarawat was like a big deal to us when, American kids, British kids, and others that lived in the kingdom whose parents worked there. When we got a chance to go to the mall, it was like incredible, right? We were very excited, go with our parents. And usually we would be on a bus, and the bus would take us from our compound, from Lockheed City, which is where I lived, to the Sarawat shopping mall. And the mall was huge. It had from what I remember, this ginormous grocery store. It was just the biggest grocery store I'd ever imagined in my life. And then food from all over the world. And there were all these shops that sold all these incredible clothes. And anyways, memories as a kid, right? But there was this one particular memory. I was about 12 years old. I was with my friend Debbie, and we were with our parents, and we were inside the mall, and they were buying groceries. And I was walking with my friend Debbie, kind of like arm in arm, and dressed appropriately always, because especially in Saudi Arabia, there were such stringent laws. And down the aisle, there were these two young men, and they were smiling at us. And of course, they were flirting, and we giggled. And as soon as we giggled, just as soon as that happened, and our parents weren't exactly with us right at that moment, because two men grabbed us by the shoulders and they dragged us out of the Sarawat, out of the grocery store area. And I remember these planters. They were had little palms in them, and it was like hard kind of tile around the edges of it. And they slammed us down into the planters. And one of them opened up their thobe, and they started yelling. And that was the long robe. They started yelling at me in Arabic and at Debbie. I started crying, and I could see a whip on the side of the man's hip, like a large whip. And all of a sudden, I felt so paralyzed, so lost, so terrified. And I realized that at that very moment that my rights, my life, my existence was in this man's hand. At least that's what went through my mind at that time. So now imagine these women in Iran standing up to the Ayatollahs, standing up to the IRGC, to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, standing up to the religious police and saying, I'm not going to do it anymore. They're taking off their abaya, they're taking off their headscarves, they're walking around with their hair down and in ponytails and just saying, you know what? You can kill me, but I am not living like this anymore. I'm not going to live like this anymore. That's a pretty amazing spiritual thing. It's it's a revolution. It really is a revolution without weapons. The weapon is their hair. Think about that. The weapon is their freedom. It's saying we're not going to stop until you stop. I always believed, even when I worked in Afghanistan, and, look, we're all the same. We may have different religions. We may come from different parts of the world and eat different food, but innately, we all want to be free. At least we should. We should want to be free. We should want that to be a choice of ours. If I cover my head and it's my choice, it's my choice. But if I don't want to cover my head, if I want to wear my hair loose, if I want to wear a pair of pants that you consider too tight, why should my life be dictated by that? That is the reason why, as Americans, we should stand up and support, and especially women, we should stand up and support our sisters overseas that are fighting for freedom. And I've always thought this: when the women stand up, when women have finally had enough of the craziness that some of these guys, and I don't even know, these religious edicts and these strange laws, that are implemented by, yes, a lot of men, but women are to blame too. Because somehow we fall into that matriarchal society as well. Like, it's weird. I'll tell you one more story and then I'll get to Walid very quickly. And it was in Afghanistan. And it was, and let me finish off. My parents came. The religious police let us go, let us get us back on the bus. Thankfully, we were not hit, we were not whipped. It was a lot of talking between my parents and them. And they put us on the bus and we were able to leave right away. Now, I don't know what happened to the two young men. I'm sure they were grabbed as well. But that's what happens when you live in that kind of closed off religious society where women have no rights and where actually men have no rights either, to some extent. And that's what happened in Afghanistan one time. And I'll just tell you quickly, in Afghanistan, it's just as complicated. But it's so poverty stricken, and you're looking back thousands, it's like when I got there, it was like being at the time of Christ in some areas. It's like being back 2,000 years in some of these villages. And I remember talking to one young Afghan girl who actually was working in Kabul, and she was basically a fighter for freedom. She was a freedom fighter for young women and young boys. She fought for school choice and all of that stuff so that women could go to the university, women could go to school. Obviously, now that all went down a proverbial toilet with the Taliban. But this was a young girl who stood up for that. And she believed in that, wow, I thought she was just amazing. But she told me this story once. She said there was in a village, in an area where the Taliban ruled, there was a young girl that had worked with her, that she knew about, that had worked with her for a long time and then had gotten married and then was no longer allowed to, communicate with her. She was living in this village and she had been forced to be married, and she was living with the mother-in-law in a kalat in this village. And her husband had gone away to work in the city. So he had gone off to Kabul to work in the city, and she was in the village with her mother-in-law. And one day she decided to take a bath. She decided to clean herself off and take a bath. And her mother-in-law immediately thought that the reason why she had taken a bath was because she wanted to clean herself so that she could have an affair on her son. And the mother-in-law took this young girl and, in a fight with her, threw her face into a frying pan filled with oil and then killed her. This, my friends, is what people are living through and what women are living through in places in the Middle East and in other parts of the world where they have absolutely no freedom, where their lives are controlled by what people think and how they're dressed and who they are, and the families are consistently on alert, and there are, women have absolutely no rights, and women have no rights to the point where even other women turn against women. Think about that. And what does that mean for us? You say, well, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for me? It means that we live in a world where our freedom and our country is so precious. It's so special that if we lose it, if we let it go, if we don't fight for it, if we don't stand up for it, if we don't live by principle, we could easily lose it. And my friends, we could easily find ourselves in similar situations. That's how serious this is. That is why I'm bringing Walid Phares on to talk about what is happening in Iran, to talk about this revolution, to talk about why it is impacting our nation and ourselves and our lives. And I know you are not going to regret listening to this. It is going to change the way you think about our policy in the Middle East and in Iran. I'm so happy to have Dr. Walid Phares, my good friend. We've known each other for a long, long time, and one of the very few people that I trust on Iranian policy and Middle Eastern foreign policy. He served in an advisory capacity in 2016 for President Donald Trump, and in 2012 for the Romney campaigns. He has testified before the State Department, Department of Justice, Department of Defense, and the United States Congress. And he is the author of many, many books, including The Coming Revolution, Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, and The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and Catastrophes to Avoid. I feel so lucky to have you on the show today, Walid. Thank you so much for being with me here.
Thank you, Sarah, for allowing me to speak to the public, but most importantly, to be on a panel with you. This is not just a guest. This is a panel between you and I. Good conversation.
Walid, I brought you on the show not only to talk about, because I think we're living in very dangerous times, and I don't think we're paying attention enough to what is happening on a global level, especially when it comes to, I call it the trifecta, Russia, China, Iran. And you have a new book out. It's called Iran, an Imperialist Republic and U.S. Policy. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. First of all, why this book and why now?
Well, Sarah, as you know, you and I had many conversations over a decade almost. And of course, the Islamic Republic of Iran was in the center of these discussions because it is a threat to the United States, to Israel, to the Arab countries, but also to its own population. And I have followed the matter, as you know, for the last 3 decades, not just in briefing US government, but also the Europeans. So the ultimate work I've done was to produce this book on Iran, and more importantly, on what we've done to stop that threat. That's why on US policy. And obviously, I had not calculated that during the fall, when the book was about to be out, that a revolution is going to explode. And that revolution today is going to make or not the future of Iran. So I'm very happy to be with you. And I have 2 points. Number one, we have, as United States, missed many opportunities to stop the Iranian threat, which we could discuss, you and I. And second, most Americans do not understand that the Iran deal and the Iran money has been very influential, very aggressively influential, not just in the region, but also against our own national security and politics in America here.
Yeah, I think those are 2 points that we really need to discuss and that we really need to dive into. And I want to talk a little bit about the revolution first. So a lot of Americans don't realize that it's even still ongoing in Iran right now. There are so many women, and I'm so proud of the Iranian women for standing up. I mean, I think it sounds so crazy, but I think once women get on board, they start to shake up the foundation of that society, right? It's a very closed, religious society. And the women, I think, are saying, wait a minute, stop. We're tired of our children being abused. We're tired of not having freedom. We're tired of being, taken by this regime and really treated in such horrendous ways. And now we see young girls walking through the streets of Iran without any hijab, saying, I'm done with this. You grew up in Lebanon, Walid. Maybe you could tell people a little bit about that, so they understand, like, what brought you to becoming such an expert on this, in the Middle East and why you're here. But you grew up in Lebanon, and I grew up in Saudi Arabia for a good portion of my life as a child. And we were able to kind of witness and see these different revolutions or changes, even towards extremism in some cases, right? Moving away from Beirut being the Paris of the Middle East to, the conflicts that erupted in your own country. Talk a little bit about your past and a little bit about what you're seeing right now as far as the revolution in Iran.
Absolutely, Sarah. I was born and raised in Beirut. I grew up. I was not even planning on emigrating, but of course, with years, a threat menaced Lebanon, a small, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, modernizing society, modernizing republic. And I saw how an Iranian-led terrorism and Syrian Ba'athist Assad led terrorism, in addition to the other jihadists and Islams. Everybody was coming to Lebanon. So it was really the first battlefields with the terrorist forces in the Middle East. So I learned a lot, though young, but learned a lot. And that country was actually destroyed and invaded by the forces of what we call the axis of evil, in fact, the axis of terrorism. With those 15 years of war that I have witnessed, though I was a law student at the time, I learned what and how these ideologies can do to destroy a society. And that is what happened also in Iran in 1979. An Islamist revolution was able to, through a coup actually, seize power and transform a earlier advanced society in Iran. They were very advanced, very liberal, they were democratic, etc. They basically, the terrorists transformed Iran into what it is right now. And then decades later, we saw, as you just mentioned, that society in Iran, thanks, of course, to time on the one hand, but also to internet, to social media, they said stop. So they did multiple revolutions, one in 1999, which was mostly on campuses. It was destroyed. The other one, the one we heard about, was in 2009 when former President Obama at the time said, I have nothing to do. The United States will not intervene, will not support them. And they were crushed by the regime. Girls started to participate early on in 2009. And then, of course, in 2019, there was a large revolution, but we were very busy with our politics. And obviously, what's happening right now, as you just mentioned to your audience, is that women are leading it. Girls, teenagers, Z generation kids are really the ones who are rising against the regime. So my past, my own personal experience in Beirut, where I saw what a society was before the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, what it became. And now I see that there is an opportunity, a window, actually, that Iranians are going to be seizing. That's why I made my points known, is that we need to help them. Because if we don't help them, they will be crushed. Iran will be transformed into a nuclear power, and our problems in the Middle East are going to grow to something we haven't seen before.
I think what's really fascinating is that CIA Director William Burns, and normally I would say with the Biden administration, this has been probably one of the most difficult administrations in my perspective. I think has had the worst foreign policy that I've seen in a long time. But I think what was surprising is that CIA Director William Burns turned around and said, hey, I'm warning the world right now. Iran is very close to becoming a nuclear state and with nuclear warheads. And the relationship between Tehran and Moscow is at a dangerous level right now. It's a threat to the West. And we're seeing what's happening as far as Ukraine. We're seeing Russia's advancements. We're seeing China and involvement there. And when I talked to some senators up on Capitol Hill, and in fact, I spoke with Senator Blackburn recently, she said for her, it's like the trifecta: China, Russia, Iran. And it's very dangerous. What is your perspective on that?
The director made 2 points, and I watched that interview at length here. Number one is that Iran is getting closer to Russia. I may differ in the estimate. Of course, they have more information, but the reading of that information is what is important. Iran and Russia have been actually very close for years, especially under the Obama administration, 8 years. But Washington did not address it because of the Iran deal. So Iran and Russia were coordinating. Iran was acquiring weapons, including missiles. But our policy was hesitating not to focus on the matter because we would lose what we thought would be the magnificent achievement, which was the Iran deal. Point number two, the director also mentioned that the Ayatollah Khamenei, the top leader of Iran, didn't make yet a decision to deploy the nuclear weapon. He is doing many things, but not that decision. I agree. Because when he will make that decision and they will assemble it at the end of the process, they will have all the long-range missiles, ballistic missiles, all the anti-aircraft missiles that they are assembling right now. And as I said earlier, Russia and China are weaponizing Iran so that when they will acquire that weapon, should they build it or it will be transferred to them from another quarter in the Middle East, I don't know. But once they will have the weapon, we won't have an ability to go in and take it out. That's reality of what's happening on the ground.
What do you think the U.S. policy is then? Is the U.S. policy, Dr. Phares, and I've talked to you about this before, is it plan A, we're going to let Israel take care of that and we'll just ride their coattails on it if Iran does develop a full-scale nuclear warhead? Or what is the policy? Because if you go back to 2009, and during the Obama administration, right, when we look back on that and the fact that I remember the Obama administration literally allowed for the sale. We pulled back on sanctions and then allowed for sale of weapons between Russia and Iran. Remember that? So that was a big moment where it was kind of like, wait a minute. How is this administration allowing this to happen? And then what are we going to do as Iran continues to speed up and move towards nuclear capabilities that are far beyond what Iran says it is? It's not for medical reasons. It's not just to run, it's not just an energy plant. This is because they want to develop nuclear capabilities and I think meet the same level of what they see diplomacy as the United States and other nuclear nations. They want to be that powerful. So what is our plan A? Is there a
Sarah, you are opening the window for me to actually summarize to your viewers, whom I hope will become my readers of the book, what is behind this whole issue. So we all remember that after the Cold War, during the 90s, Iran was still growing in power. And unfortunately, the Clinton administration did not do much. I mean, the US were the sole power before Putin came back and everything else. And we failed so because the Iranian regime linked up with the radical politicians and factions and left-wing factions within the United States. And those left-wing factions who lost the Soviet Union were looking to find another exotic revolutionary force. And they found in Iran. But behind that, Sarah, that was funding. Iran funded large segments of left-wing in Latin America, in the Middle East, and here. I'm saying the far left-wing. Now, that meant that for about 8 years or 9 years, there was no U.S. action against the Iran regime. We lost that decade. Then came the Iraq War. In the Iraq War, the Iranian leadership was very concerned about the actions by the United States. Suddenly they saw that we have NATO forces in Afghanistan, and then we have coalition forces in Iraq. They felt that they were surrounded. And then, of course, the revolution will come later. Now, they decided to launch an offensive, a political, diplomatic, financial offensive, to reach out inside the United States to speak with radical forces and convince them that they can have a deal with them. And that deal basically was, you release the money that is frozen. They have $150 billion frozen in the US and many other countries, and we will make sure that we will stop the nuclear buildup. But what they've done in reality is that they received billions and billions of dollars from the Iran deal, which was sponsored by the Obama-Biden administration at the time. What did they do with that money, Sarah? You and I know, everybody knows. They bought weapons, they bought missiles, they started to modernize all their forces. They funded all these militias in the Middle East, from Iraq to Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and on. But they did something else. As of 2014 and 15, they did something else with a slice of that money. It was basically to use influence within the United States and in Europe. Let me say it clearly, they used a slice of that money to buy lobbying influence inside the United States, which will explain why, despite Congress wanted to do so, despite the Trump administration trying to change it, there was always that drive to, we cannot quit the Iran deal. And that's why the Biden administration is still here. So my simple point is, when you ask me about what should the US do logically, well, there is the logical US position, which is we should basically help the Iranian people win their war or win their revolution. And then you have the reality of the matter, which is the Biden administration continuing the line of the Obama administration. They don't want to change that regime, actually, because that regime has opened their markets to a large block of financial interest in the United States. We see it already in Europe. German, French, Italian companies are sitting in Iran making money, and their governments, despite the revolution, despite the women killed in Iran, is not ready to budge. we have a similar situation here, Sarah. We have a super lobby beyond the Iran lobby. It's called the Iran deal lobby. It's worth, hundreds of billions of dollars of what they want to achieve with Iran and with the allies of Iran, and that is stopping our policy. That is stopping our action here in Washington, D.C.
Well, and I think this is so frightening, Walid, because how do we expose that? And even when it's exposed, even when these lobbies are exposed and these lobbyists, with all that money pouring into Washington, D.C., with people being bought out, and everybody knew this is what the Biden administration was moving towards. It still is another Iran deal. They want the JCPOA come, excuse my language, hell or high water, right? That's what they're moving towards. So how do we stop this? Because I can't imagine a more dangerous situation for us or our allies in the Middle East than Iran becoming the superpower that it wants to be. And it's going to do it with our money and with our own, with our swamp, with our own lawmakers and lobby in the United States.
Let me ask the public to start thinking about it and Google about it, and they're going to find it on their own, Sarah. When we send $150 billion to the Iran regime, $150 billion, what would be back to the United States and to Europe, of course, in terms of influence and in terms of pressure? You say 10%, 1%, at least 1%, meaning $1.5 billion is back on continental United States to buy influence. Why is it that most of the so-called mainstream media is really defending the Iran deal despite the revolution in Iran? Why? There must be a reason. Well, we have this information now. Many of these segments of these media have been actually attracted to deals, sub-deals, baby deals with Iran. And then, of course, you have those big corporations who have been promised to go inside Iran. If you want me to name, there is a long list. I will only ask people to go on Google and find how many contracts were these companies promised to have in Iran, and you'll get your answers. There are not just billions, trillions of dollars of influence. And my concern, which I expressed it in my book, is that usually these are foreign lobbies or lobbies linked to foreign interests. They may have intervened in our politics. They may have been behind the actions and the smear campaigns against experts, against journalists. They even may have been behind siding with one political party against another political party. Once that money is inside the United States, it has been weaponized against those who refuse the Iran deal. So we're not talking anymore about a battlefield in the Middle East. Now the battlefield is also here in Washington.
That's such a brilliant point. That is such a brilliant point. And let's talk about that battlefield. We saw it during the Trump administration. Iran obviously became irate. I remember when, for the short time that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was working in the White House, national security, he came out and he spoke against the Iranians and said point blank, we are not going to, this deal ends now. We are not going forward with this deal. And it was almost as if that moment was an epic moment in the end of his tenure. That was it. Yeah. That was the one moment that I remember. And I thought, wow. And I know Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, but I thought, wow, that really was such a poignant moment. And it was the very beginning of the end.
Sarah, this is in my book, even the case of General Flynn, but many other cases, there was a pressure coming from the bureaucracy of the former President Obama, the same bureaucracy that produced the deal and therefore would benefit from the deal. See the equation? They produce the deal, they protect the deal, they will benefit from the deal when they leave the bureaucracy and the administration, which is something we do in the United States, right? At the end of your tenure, you go and then what do? You are hired by companies because you have the prominence of having served. Which companies are hiring those who have left the administrations before and who are in support of the Iran deal? Well, the companies that are making money from the Iran deal. Does that make sense now? So obviously, during the 4 years of President Trump, a large chunk of this energy and power and influence that was uprising against him, working with the bureaucracy, happened to be the network that is behind the Iran deal. It's just mind boggling.
It is mind boggling because then it tells me that it's all for show, right? I mean, the people in Iran really are losing their lives, standing up to their government, to their tyrannical government. And the United States is supposed to be a nation based on principle, right? Our foundation, a beacon of light, an example to the rest of the world. But if our leadership is playing behind the scenes with the Iranians, JCPOA is, still in the background and ready to be risen up again. You know what I mean? It's like then the tragedy is that we're not going to be there for them. We're not going to be there for the people.
You got it. That's the point. You just now made a statement that no other journalists have been able to capture and understand. This force within us, embedded in us, has been working for the interest of the Iran deal, which is the interest of the Iran regime at the same time. I mean, people would ask me questions from the region. What's going on in Washington? The Iranian people, women, girls, minorities are all uprising. Look at the bloodshed in Iran, and nothing happens, including from the most liberal quarters. It's only recently that they started to talk about women in Iran. I have been bombarding them with my tweets for the last 3 months. That's another issue. But the liberal, so-called liberal progressive world here is part of it. They have been funded by it as well. That's why they are so much against the policy, the Iran policy of the Trump administration. And now they're saying, oh, we'll see. It's about jobs of women in Iran. No, it's not about jobs of women in Iran. The Iranian women are telling them that's not the truth. It's about freedom. It's about our basic rights and freedom of speech.
The most important thing that any of us can fight for is our freedom. It doesn't even matter. Like once they've taken away, your health or your freedom, your family, I mean, it all comes together. And that ability to be free. And while you were talking, Walid, I was remembering back to a story a good friend of mine, Derek Maltz, was involved in. And it was during the Obama administration. And they had this operation called Operation Cassandra. I don't know if you remember this with the DEA. And they were going after Hezbollah, right? And it was about Hezbollah basically laundering money. So the Iranian government laundering money in the United States, how Hezbollah turned, trafficking cocaine to laundering money that was used, I think they used cars to finance its expansion. Like they were basically selling used cars, laundering money through the used car business after selling the cocaine. We had our Drug Enforcement Administration getting all of this evidence against Hezbollah. And all of a sudden, the Obama administration, because they wanted so desperately to pass and to get the JCPOA, to get this nuclear deal with Iran, they just stomped all over the investigation and shut it down under Eric Holder. It was like they did it for Iran. There's a perfect example for everyone who's listening right now of what Dr. Phares is saying is 100% accurate and on the money. They're coming after you, though, because of this. Not just, the Iranians, but the Iranian lobby here in the United States and others. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's important.
Well, Sarah, a piece of it, but we are discovering every day that, number one, the Iran deal lobby, which is enmeshed, is connected to a lot of influence within the United States, within our bureaucracy, within our agencies, within our government. And that's very serious. For 30 years, for 3 decades, I thought that the government is neutral and only protect the national security interests of the United States. I have never imagined that part of the government or bureaucracies will be protecting the national security interests of Iran because, of course, of the benefits that they or their future employer has. I used to lecture and be contracted by various agencies for 25 years, talking about the Middle East and training our own national security teams about how to confront the jihadists and the pro-Iranian regime. As of 2015, I realized that my connections to all these agencies and all these teaching programs have been cut one after the other. And then, of course, I saw the coordination between parts of this bureaucracy and media, getting out all these stories, smear stories against me. It started with Mother Jones, obviously, and then it moved to New York Times, Washington Post. Since when they will do this? They were basically articulating a systematic persecution policy against any expert, and I'm probably one of them who understand what is happening. And now they stretched it to social media and even beyond that, which will be a different story that I will serve later.
Dr. Phares, I know what you've been through. I've seen it. I've seen it play out in our government. I was also stunned to the extent of these powers in Washington, D.C., and the weaponization of our bureaucracies, as well as the weaponization of, I think, the money that U.S. tax dollars and money that we were holding actually from Iran when we returned it, how they weaponized it against
Yeah.
us and how we allowed that to happen to us. I'm going to, before I get to the very end and ask you where people can buy your book and all of that great stuff, and I promise you we're going to post that up on my website at saracarter.com with links so that people can get right there and buy the book. I think it's an incredible book. I can't wait for everyone to get a chance to read this. But before we get there, how dangerous of a situation are we in your assessment with a nuclear confrontation with Russia, with the ability for Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon? I mean, how close do you believe we are to that moment?
Well, Sarah, we have been speaking about the Iran deal, quote unquote, which was an Obama Biden deal with the Iranian regime. But there is another Iran deal. And that Iran deal is between Iran and Russia, between Iran and China. That's the real actual threatening deal to our national security. Now, everybody is asking me about what do you think about the drones? I mean, Iran is manufacturing these drones, sending them to Russia to use against Ukraine. Of course, but there is a price for that. When Iran is going to be helping Russia, and it is, so Russia is going to do what? Extend its air cover, extend its umbrella, the Israelis call it the dome, over Iran. When that happens, it means that Russian and Chinese very advanced long-range missiles will be deployed in Iran. Iran doesn't have even to buy them. They will deploy them, and Russia would argue, oh, Iran has been helping us with the drone. So we need to help Iran now against Israel, the Arab countries, and eventually the United States. And my worst scenario, the nightmare scenario, is at one point, Russia is going to deploy tactical nukes inside Iran, and this will be the actual threat that we were not expecting. We were expecting Iran to produce a nuke. No, they may get actually tactical nukes deployed, and Iran will say, now I'm a nuclear power with my allies, China and Russia, and now I'm deterring any attempt to attack me or try to intervene in my affairs. This will change history in the region. We are close to this, not yet there, but we are very close to this.
I think that we're looking at a change, a geopolitical change in our world. And I keep saying we as a nation have to pay attention to this. I don't feel like our lawmakers are doing that. I feel like they are going to be caught off guard. Either they don't care or they don't understand this. And it is going to put future generations of Americans in jeopardy and our nation in jeopardy and the freedom of the world in jeopardy. Where can people go to get your book, Dr. Phares?
Well, thank you so much. My book is found wherever books are found. Mostly it's Amazon, all the major bookstores. You could also do it through social media. I'll be happy to sign a copy if you send me a text or a message through social media. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. So this is the way they could get the book. But more importantly, when you read the book, write about it, write a comment, go to the website. People other than yourselves, the readers, should know about what's going on. And really, I thank you, Sarah, for broadcasting my voice and these concerns for the first time in that dramatic matter.
Oh, anytime, anytime. And I hope you come back to the show. Everybody, that's Iran, an Imperialist Republic and U.S. Policy by Dr. Walid Phares. Believe me, you want to read this book. You want to be prepared because there is so much changing in our world and we need to be educated on it. And I'm going to bring you back to talk about this and so much more. Dr. Phares, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, very much.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for right now today. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Thank you so much for being a part of my life. And I look forward to hearing everything you all have to say. Remember, please write, please get in touch with me. I love reading your reviews. Go to YouTube, download the podcast, go to Rumble, wherever you want to watch, wherever you want to go, and tell me your thoughts. I listen and I will make sure to take care of you. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless artificial intelligence and Elon Musk. And God bless the great state of Texas.